They want to get you for as cheap as possible. And we want to get as much as possible. And I love the saying is that you can name your price as a seller, but it's the terms that really count.
Yeah.
And the seller you can call whatever price you want. Yeah, a headline price if that's what you want for your ego, and you can publish that, knock yourself out. But here's what you're actually going to get paid, because we will set so many traps for you that you're going to be lucky to keep that first check, dude. And that's out of probably 40 people I've spoken to who've sold. None of those have had their second check.
Brian Keegan, it's a pleasure to see you again and to welcome you to the Inner Entrepreneur podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Paul.
It's great to have you on, Brian. And, I spend a lot of my time on this podcast beating up on people who just want to scale. So, which seems a bit offensive because scaling is your thing. But so I'm really interested. Maybe you tell us who you are, what it is you do, and how it is you got there.
Goodness, yeah, great opening question. How far do you want me to go back? Back to the womb.
As far as you think is important.
The short version, the absolute shortest version. I grew up in Newbridge, County Kildare. My dad there was a family business there. It was general builders, providers, everything from a needle to an anchor, as people in Kildare used to say. If you wanted literally a needle, right up to a Miele kitchen or a builder's provider, we had everything. Water for Chris, everything. And I worked in that as a kid, and then after school, I worked in it too. And then, unfortunately, when my dad, I was in New York actually for almost a year, that I kind of, after not doing so well in the Leaving Cert, I skipped town and went to New York for a year with a bunch of guys from school. Came back when my dad was ill, and then a few months later he died. So I went in full time then into the family business, which resulted in, because I was only like 20 at the time, my dad had put an accountant in charge. I hasten to say an unqualified accountant, which was a big learning for me and for a lot of our family, who ran the business into the ground. And he kicked me out of the business after 2 years, and then 2.5 years after that, the business closed down because he'd been embezzling in the business, and unfortunately it closed down. I'd gone to England at that stage, worked in a hardware shop, and then ended up working in insurance, door-to-door insurance, and then bumping into a community or a handful of people who went from, I was in Aldershot in Hampshire, which is a garrison town. So I went from one garrison town in the Curragh to another garrison town in Aldershot, of all places. But I happened to be selling insurance to army personnel. And then in 1992, Maggie Thatcher did the other option for armed people because of the Cold War. Military powers were downscaling. A lot of army people were leaving the army with big payouts, and went into, a lot of them were in telecoms and engineering, and ended up going into what was then the fledgling industry of IT and telecoms contracting. Okay. And so I followed all of these guys into that, and sold them pensions and mortgages and all the financial services stuff. And then in 1998, somebody said, one of my contractor friends said, "Oh, Brian, you're doing all my pensions and all my mortgages and all the rest. My accountant is useless. Will you sort that out?" So I went, "I'm not an accountant, but so," and they said, well, 40 of them got together, and we met in the Queen Mary. I remember it crystal clear. It's when my first business, my start of my business. Customers tell you a lot of stuff, don't they? And this was one of those instances.
The customer's asking for it.
Customer was asking. He said, "Yeah, if you could do our mortgages, pensions, and our bookkeeping, accounting, and all that.
If you could do the whole package, yeah,
the whole package." And then was born a company called 360, which was my first company, 360 degree, one-stop shop, which was a bit like my own man's shop. It was a one-stop shop. So I created
Except it wasn't finance.
one in finance and specifically in the niche of in the niche of just IT and telecoms contractors only, because they were the highest paid contractors in the UK at the time. And so I kicked that off in 1998. And, between Y2K, the dot-com revolution, telecoms being connected all around the world, just contracting, I just jumped on as a friend of mine who was my mentor, which we didn't call him that back in the 90s, but he was my mentor, a fellow called Frank Kelly from Galway, who had been in London for 30 years. And he'd smoke a pipe and I'd meet him and he'd go, Brian, he said, with a tailwind like this, even a turkey could fly.
I'm not sure if that's a backhanded compliment.
It was a totally front-handed insult, It was, and he was like, Brian, don't get run away with yourself. Because I was up to 100 staff, 6 offices around the UK and Ireland. We were on 2,500, 3,000 contractors on our books, paying a weekly and a monthly fee. Wow. We were killing it. We were and everybody was buying. All of those were buying pensions and buying a fixed fee accountancy.
But even with the wind at your back, it's not easy to build a business of that size. It just isn't. I don't care what's,
I don't know.
There's some talent in there.
I prefer a load of luck than a load of skill, because I don't have a preference. I just have a reasonable amount of luck.
Just the outcome preference.
Skill. Yeah. I take luck anytime. It does certainly help. Just hitting the right market at the right time does help. But it does also give you a false sense of security, which I did take, which I didn't wake up to. And Frank was right. I was a bit of a turkey flying with a great tailwind, and then the wind came out of its sails in 2001-2. There was almost perfect storms of 9/11, the dot-com bang, telecoms, WorldCom, Enron, all of those companies went bust, and we had contractors in there, and literally we lost half of our book over kind of like a few months, and that was kind of the turkey came out of the sky, and that was pretty damn painful, and we had to shrink down. We actually went into receivership for 12 months, which was very painful. We had directors falling out, disputes. We ended up in the High Court, losing. It was pain for a few years, even though there was great joy for the first, 98, 99, 2000, kind of 4 or 5 years of amazing. You thought everything you touched was going to turn to gold, and it was turning to gold. They used to call me Park Lane Paddy, because I had a flat on Park Lane up at the
Park Lane Paddy.
Yeah, a balcony overlooking Hyde Park. When the concerts were on, I used to be able to bring a party along, and the 9/11 convertible parked downstairs, and I was just and Bond Street offices with 60 or 70 people, and then all these other, I was absolutely, my English friend, here comes Park Lane Paddy, and I was living the dream, but it soon, not like everything, but I didn't realize it was going to come and hit me so fast. And I guess people like my mentors and people around me who had been kind of hinting, Brian, you need to maybe slow it down or just be a bit more conservative. I think that I would have done things a lot differently. But so that's we went into receivership, came back out of receivership, then luckily went to MIT. It was said before we pressed record there, through the EO MIT program, the EMP, which is Entrepreneurial Master's Program. I met Vern Harnish and the scaling up methodology, and I went and then put that into my business, which allowed me to rebuild and then eventually sell it back in 2018.
It's it reminds me of I've kind of had similar conversations with many guests on the show, and two things stand out. One is that building a business or building wealth and keeping it are two different things.
Oh my God.
And everyone focuses on how do I build and how do I grow, but how do I keep what I've built? How do I walk away with something or sustain something? Because often they're two separate skill sets, which I think is probably what your mentor recognized. You have this tailwind, and that, but something different might be required to maintain that for for as long as you want, either to sell it or just to maintain it as a business. I think there's two different skills there,
Mm.
which can be hard to recognize. But it is very hard when you're being that successful not to think, I mean, I'm just a natural at this. And humility, I don't know, humility comes hard. But the other thing that strikes me is that, and so many people look at entrepreneurs and they see the Park Lane Paddy, and they see the Porsche parked, but they look at you in a particular way. But I'm going to say almost every entrepreneur I've ever spoken to, on the podcast or otherwise, tells the hard story as well. Like I've just never known a guy who's gone, I just nailed this and I've cruised for 40 years, and that's just, the hard stories are always there. It's what we learn from, I suppose. But every entrepreneur has them.
They do. You're absolutely right. And we don't show that to the external world. A lot of people think everything that we do touch turns to gold. But
Yeah.
I remember on the humility bit, I remember saying to my wife, and this is going to, I need to be more humble. And you know what she said to me? She said, Brian, you've got a lot to be humble about.
Well, gosh, we must introduce our wives.
When you're married, to someone like that, you do actually kind of rein yourself back in and take a reality check. And had I been married to her when that was going on, I probably think it would have been a whole lot different. Because I married her just as the tumble began. She married Park Lane Paddy, and then a year later she was married to Park Bench Paddy.
Yeah. But she's remained married to Brian Keegan.
Well, that's when you figure out that you got the right one, because it's a 50-50, I think, chance that she could have, and could have.
So when you became Park Bench Paddy, I love that. I'm guessing, did she change from the point of view? Was she now encouraging you to, like when you were up on the pedestal, she was probably telling you need to be a little more humble. I imagine when you were on the park bench, she was going, mate, you've got a whole lot more potential.
I'm not sure what she thought, but I'm not sure she thought I had much potential, because things had gone so awry. Wheels had just, every wheel had come off. And it had just gone from daylight to darkness almost after our honeymoon. It was that quick, and it went that badly wrong. And we had a bunch of we had a property portfolio with the company, and everything was gone. Everything was gone within 12 months. And she was also pregnant with our first baby. And we were she was at the back of the high court watching me as a bad witness, because entrepreneurs make shitty witnesses, I can tell you. And she was watching all of that. So I'm not sure at that point she said, Brian's got potential. I don't think that was in her head. I'll tell you a funny story with your listeners. It does, there's a lot of learnings and I think every entrepreneur you and I know, I think, had a dark moment where they thought, shit, this ain't gonna.
I think so.
I'm not going to come out of this. And one of our moments was when we decided we were going into receivership, and I was deciding whether I was going to go personally bankrupt. And we were with this fella, Mark was his name. He was East End kind of guy, geezer. He was a real Ebenezer geezer. And Kerry was like 7 or 8 months pregnant, and we were meeting him to hand him up to sign the documents, which we didn't, by the way, sign in the very end. But at that point we were looking, and he was explaining to us that this is what he said. What's going to happen is you're going to give me the keys to all your assets, and then you don't have to worry about anything. You just I'll take care of it from here. And Kerry was kind of holding everything together and just been through the High Court, and was like so solid the whole way along, because I struggled the whole way through that period. I literally, at one point, I punched the wall with anger and fear that she actually was holding me up. And anyway, when this guy was explaining that we were going to lose everything and it would all go into a pot and then the creditors would take it, she started kind of welling up a bit, and this guy who's had the emotional intelligence of a gnat, I can see, Kerry, you're a bit upset, ain't ya?
Sounds like Del Boy.
All right. She says, yeah, I'm just a little bit. I'm fine. I'm fine. No, look, you don't need to worry about it. You're worried about what's going to happen because you're losing the properties, you're losing the company, you're losing it. And she said, yeah, just leave. I'm fine. I'm fine. So no, Kerry said, you don't need to worry about nothing. So I see you're expecting a baby. And she goes, yeah. She's like 8 months. She's out here, very observant of you.
Yeah,
You don't
fair
need to
enough.
worry about it, nothing. Because you're expecting a baby, you're going to go right to the top of the council house list.
Okay, that's encouraging.
So with that,
That's where I want to be.
burst out and went, oh shit, that's
Yeah.
where it's going to be. That's where.
Wow.
But anyway, we didn't end up.
You didn't sign the
We didn't
documents.
sign the documents. Actually, we managed to, only the landlords and HMRC, that tax.
And what prevented you from
Everybody else
signing
got
the
paid,
documents?
'cause-
What prevented you from signing the documents and handing everything away?
I guess I then switched advisors, and he's my advisor and my barrister since then, a fellow called Philip, and he just kind of made me see sense for the first time, because I was a bit of a thick-headed, single-minded. This is how it's going to be done. Keep out of my way. And I think as entrepreneurs, we do have to be single-minded. But I was single-minded, but then it was only my opinion kind of counted, which wasn't very healthy. But then this guy, he's been my mentor and my barrister since then, and that was 20-something years ago. He'd just sit down and say, "Here, Brian, this is what we're going to do." And so he showed me, here, this is, we're going to do this a different way, and we're going to save the business, which we did. And we regrouped and built our own software, went back into the market, and the thing flew. Like particularly when we built our own software, we outsourced to India. We started being able to drop our prices ever so slightly, but delivering like a day and a half faster than our competitor, because we were paying contractors, and the thing just flew. And we had software type margins, but it was all under his and maybe 2 or 3 other people's guidance. That, because I had a business mentor with the YPO. I had a business coach who used to come in. I had a life coach as well, and I had a spiritual director. I had 4 people that
Wow.
that I would meet once a month at least, probably once a week, some of them, depending on how busy we were, just to keep myself on the straight and narrow, which I didn't have before the wheels came off. And I think that's why it's ever so important to have good counsel. Just anybody, just somebody who you know and trust, and somebody who's been there and done it before you, so that they're not just talking.
And do you
theory.
keep that good counsel now?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting listening to you is that you spent a long time telling the story of doom, how difficult it was, which, by the way, I think is really important for people to listen to, particularly young entrepreneurs, because I don't see these stories as depressing. To me, they're an expression to younger entrepreneurs that you will hit challenges, and it's the road you're on. You know what I mean? It's. I remember my mother passed away 15 years ago, shortly after I got married, or I can't remember. Maybe it was when we had our first child, saying to me something to the effect that when you have a baby, it can be really, really difficult on a marriage. It puts a lot of pressure on a marriage. And we'd been married for maybe 4 or 5 years before I had our first child. So an extended honeymoon, and then this baby comes along. And I remember saying to Paul that it can be really, really difficult. The young child is like. And I remember when it became really, really difficult, when a baby's crying at 4 o'clock in the morning and both of us had to get up for work, and we're at each other. And I remember my mother's words, because I've thought to myself, this is what happens. Like, this is the road. It's not that there's something wrong with our marriage. This is just the road. And that was a real insight. So I suppose that's the insight I'm looking for people to take away, that when they come to the challenge, that it's the road. But the other side is that then you very quickly said, and we get over it, and the rest was kind of roses. And I have been at fault of telling similar stories. Many, many years ago, I'd been at a dinner party, and I went through a massive change in the business, maybe not quite as dramatic as yours, but I did go through a big change in the business. And I would many years ago tell the story at a dinner party. And as I'd be telling this great story, my wife would go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're telling nobody about the 2 years of shit that you went through. I mean, you're not telling anyone about how extremely difficult it was for 2 years. And I'd brush her off and go, yeah, 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 yeah. As time went on and maybe I got a little more mature, I realized, oh, that's the most important part. That's the key to the story, is that I went through those difficult years, because to come out the other side is often you often have to walk through the challenge to come out the other side.
Mm.
So I'm guessing you didn't actually just snap your fingers and build this great 360 group. I'm guessing that you turned a corner and then climbed a mountain.
Yeah, the it was kind of a regrouping exercise, because 360 had existed since 1998. Then we went into receivership in 2002, 2003 actually, and then it started getting going. So it took me a couple of years. Yeah, it didn't. I guess the biggest. It took a couple of years. It felt like I was in the desert, in the doldrums for a couple of years, and I think I was. But the biggest part for me was meeting this WPO, which is part of YPO, which is a sister group of EO, in this mentorship program. This guy in WPO, a fellow called Robert, we're still in touch today, and this is 20 years ago plus. And he was the chief executive of Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group, so big hitter. He was the CEO, and he was to be posted back to the US, but then he ended up staying in London. I said, "Hey, any chance you could mentor me?" And he had chosen somebody else to mentor in the program, but then it was just one thing and another, and he taught me so many different things about. One of the things he said, "Brian, stop spending your own dollars. Like, stop," because had been so skint. And I was like really, really being frugal on investment in the future. He said, "Brian, you've got to invest. Stop thinking you're taking away from your own salary or your own dividend. Invest for the future now, because you've got an opportunity in front of you. And also just stop tripping over things that are behind you." That's what he told me.
Yeah, in the past.
In the past, yeah, he said, "Why are you tripping over stuff that are in your past? And what happened in the past does not mean equal what happened. Because I realized that I made so many mistakes, and I'm thinking, am I just going to be prone to those kind of mistakes again?" He said, "No, and we're going to change that." And things like financial reporting, getting the right people around me, and that was the other thing. Was just there was less than a handful of people who I remember through those times that supported me. One was Robert, another was this guy, Philip, who's my barrister, a friend of mine, Eamon, and a friend of mine, Gareth. This guy, Frank, who was my mentor. Yeah, there was kind of those few people that I knew who knew to support. I don't know how they knew to support me, but they did. Because I wasn't calling out for it, because I was kind of gone back into my shell. But there were certain people who just knew to do the right things when I wasn't instructing or asking for it. So yeah, when you look back on it, just surrounding yourself with those, they say that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. So I think it's really important, particularly when you do hit that storm, that you do have those people around you. And sometimes it's just luck, or sometimes it just come out of the woodwork. But all those kind of things, and then just putting it straight, trying to find what the North Star is and what it is that we're trying to do, and then trying to rebuild and go, okay, how can we build something different this time around? Rather than just going, because all I was doing was going for growth. And that served well. But growth for just growth's sake, that whole, revenues for vanity, profit for sanity, cash flow is king, and valuation is emperor, is the kind of, it's the full version of that. Is not just looking at the turnover, is looking at your profitability, is looking at your cash flow beneath that, and then is looking at the valuation underneath that of the company, which I hadn't been looking at all in the previous episode of chapter 1 of building that business. So chapter 2 was just a totally new chapter with a fresh look at it. And the MIT program really helped to do that. And that was just good timing as well, 2006. So I was just getting the confidence back. and then went into a group each summer with 60 other entrepreneurs at MIT from all around the world. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is how you run a business.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is that you don't know what you don't know.
Mm.
And when we spoke about luck. I don't know what it was before we hit record or not. And luck is a big part of it. And I think you were very fortunate to have those sort of people around you from all aspects of your life that could advise and guide and mentor you. You're very lucky. You were very lucky to have that, but you have to be open and receptive to that also, and you have to not let your ego get in the way. But I think one of the things about developing in your life in any way, and when you go through these challenges, part of the reason I would think that you were able to move on and become much more successful again was that a bit, maybe the expression "stop spending your own dollars" is that you'd been through what you'd been through and you took the lessons without carrying the trauma. You took the lessons and you learned from the people around you and go, okay, right, that was both successful and a mess up, and shit went wrong, but I've learned a lot, I've grown, and you start again a new person, and you build something new. When you moved into that phase two, you talked about the North Star. Was exiting part of the North Star, or was that on your horizon at all?
It's a really good question. No, it wasn't. Uh, and I think that was a fault. I think I should have focused on that a lot more. But all I wanted to do was get the business back up and running again, make it profitable, make it successful, just to prove that
Yeah,
that I can rebound.
yeah,
What's his name? Endo Cunning wrote a book, the Irish entrepreneur, The Unsinkable Entrepreneur, and I used to have that there and going, right, I'm not going to sink. I just want to make sure. I want to prove to the world that I can make it back again.
yeah,
So that's all I had in my mind was really, how do we go back in phase two, in 2.0, us, me, and the company, and make this better with the learnings that I had. So, and the first thing that we did was we said it was the mid 2000s. We built our own software on .NET technology, which
mm,
was just newish at the time, a couple of years old. And we created an online system for contractors to be able to track their payments, which never existed before.
mm,
And that also allowed us to outsource our back office, which was the back office work, data processing work was being done in London. We were then able to outsource that, and we outsourced it. We had an office with about 20 people in it in Bangalore,
wow,
just a place called Salem, south of Bangalore. And that we were just able to do overnight work and have everything prepared and payroll ready and out the door by 9 a.m. before anybody else had started their processing. So
mm,
that made us faster, quicker, better. And I just enjoyed. I remember I used to have a moped coming back to Barnes in West London, and I just remember singing with joy, being just the moment or the time, and I went, "We're back."
you're back, yeah,
And it was after about 2.5 years of wondering whether actually I could do this again, and then remembering, I think it was maybe a big agency, a client agency, signing up to us to be on their exclusive or on their preferred supplier list, something like that. I can't remember, but it was a big win, and numbers just started going crazy again. But in a controlled way, that we were able to scale it because we were in India. We were able to scale it because we had the software built, and it was just an entirely different vibe. It was more controlled. Yeah. So yeah, but answering your question, no, I didn't have the exit in mind, and I just ran that for another 10 years happily, because I was
you
enjoying
were
it.
enjoying it. I can see in your face, it looks like you were really enjoying it. I suppose second time round you're going, no, I'm going to enjoy it this time.
Yeah, and I had a lovely team, an amazing team of people. Some who'd been there through the first phase of anxiety, who were incredibly loyal, who I love to bits, still in touch with them. And then there was new people who came on board. yeah, you're just surrounded by thinking, oh, okay, these are the people who are competent, who those three things that I look for now when I work with people: are they fun, are they competent, and are they trustworthy? Just those three things.
Yeah.
And it was a client company, Computer Futures, actually, S3 Group. The founder, Bill Butler, said there's the three things I look for, and I went, that's what I need to do. And in my mind, that's as long as they're competent, trustworthy, and fun,
Yeah.
get on with it. Just get on, trust each other, set up, have your set of values, your set of rules that you want to work by, and get on with it, and just try and delight the customer, which we did. We got people paid quicker than anyone else. They had all their accuracy. We had a money back guarantee if we weren't on time. Our strapline was on time, online on time, every time. If you couldn't see everything online, if it wasn't accurate and you weren't paid on time, you got a refund of your fee in that pay period. And it was just fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Anyone who's not listening to this in podcast, who's watching this on YouTube, can see that you now live on a farm in Newbridge, is it? Or Lucan,
Yeah,
wherever.
outside Lucan, yeah, between Lucan and
So
Lincoln.
you now are a farmer in Lucan. Um, so you're no longer Park Lane Paddy. Uh, so what happened to take you from London back to Ireland?
Yeah, and now Lord Lucan, but
Lord Lucan. Oh, my apologies, Lord Lucan.
Lord Lucan,
Lord Lucan.
because I live in a
You,
house.
you really wrap up the titles. I like it.
Oh yeah, well, we were fortunate to buy a fellow called Sir John Pritchard Jones used to own this place, and he was a cousin of the Queen and an aide de camp for Winston Churchill. So they kind of go, oh, look at Lord Lucan there. So from coming from bust back and then being able to be fortunate enough to pick up this little farm, has been fun. And we kind of, we have an amazing view over the Dublin Mountains, or as the Germans or the Swiss would say, they are not mountains, they are hills.
Yes,
We call them
very
mountains.
nice. Yeah.
Every day my wife and I go, we're very fortunate considering everything all said and done. Yeah, so the kids were getting older. They were growing up. Our eldest was 9 or so. She had a lovely little English, West London English accent. She's now got a very Irish accent. So the kids were getting older, and it was kind of like, what are we going to do? And my intention was always to come home. So
Okay.
as the crash occurred, and we were looking at various things, going, oh, in the location that I want, because I wanted to be near the airport. We're only 17 minutes from the airport here. We wanted some land. We wanted that, and this place just ticked all the boxes. And then the crash happened because things were kind of crazy in 06, 07. We thought, nah, we'd probably stay in London. And then the crash happened, and stuff started coming within reason. And then I sold part of the company, and we just went and bought it, which was a bit crazy at the time because things continued to drop a bit further afterwards. But we were here, and the kids absolutely love here. They also love going back to London, meeting their old classmates and stuff. So it's a kind of happy mix.
So are you entirely out of that business now? Is that
Yeah, I sold it in 2018, lock, stock, and barrel. There was three elements to the business, and sold them all. One in an MBO and the other in a trade sale.
but you weren't content with just farming?
Well, I wandered around. Yeah, well, I'm not really a farmer.
Enough shoveling
I'm
shit.
fake. I'm not cut out. I'm not really a farmer. As I think before we pressed record, we say, as my farmer mates around here said, does that mean anyone can call themselves a farmer? Brian calls himself a farmer. But yeah, I wanted, after I sold up, and this is kind of part of the journey. I think maybe why you reached out to me was part of the whole exit planning thing. The life after exit I hadn't planned, and for 2 years, photographed there, long hair, long beard. I just never wore a suit for 2 years,
Yeah.
and my missus goes, I'm not your hobby. Go and find, would you ever go and do something with your life?
Yeah.
And I went traveling, went to Japan 3 times in 1 year after setting up, and went to States numerous times with the kids, hired an RV, did loads of kind of life after exit stuff. But then eventually I think, and I do kind of teach this, do kind of teach this now, is like, it's about your identity and your purpose, because I truly believe there is a thing. PTSD, I think, is real in when it comes to exits, post transaction stress disorder. People, every person I know has done an exit within a year. Even doesn't matter how much, like lottery amounts of zeros, amounts of money in your bank account, but they have almost everybody has a crisis because we don't plan what we're going to do next, and we lose all our sense of purpose, and we particularly our sense of identity, and where we're not needed anymore. You know, when I did the road show with customers, and then emails just and
Stopped.
then stopped. We went on a cruise, and I remember coming back from that, and it was like zero. There was nothing I was needed for.
Nobody was looking for you.
Nobody's looking for me, and that really kind of and I kind of literally had a decompression of the brain, because you have all this stress and anxiety to get a deal over the line. And I'd been a while getting to that point. I had been to the altar a few times trying to sell the business. Eventually did, and then I had this decompression of, okay, I'm out now, and I've got my freedom. And I think that with that, then there's just, we don't plan for what we're going to do next. So, I'd encourage people, if they're thinking about it, is to just have an idea of where it is the next step is going to be, because it does a couple of things. It gets your brain ready that you're not going to have this total decompression. You might start planning or just having something else to do outside of your business, because I was very single-minded, just doing the business and nothing else. But also, it shows to a potential buyer that you're not desperate, that you have something, that you have a positive intent to go on to it. And that, I think, does show up when you're in the negotiation to sell your business.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than selling anything when you have to sell it. You always need to be a kind of well, that's been my approach. You always need to be almost like a disinterested seller, and kind of buy if you want, don't buy if you don't want. I don't mind. So this event you've kindly invited me to next week, the plan your exit. So what led you to getting into this space of working with people to plan exits? So what led you into that, and what's it all about?
Good point on what led me to it. I guess I didn't plan my exit particularly well, to be totally frank. I I was pretty ill prepared. I in one of the sales, I didn't instigate a broker, which an M&A professional, which was a mistake, and I got taken to the cleaners a wee bit with a trade sale who had a private equity, had a professional in there. So I thought I could deal with that person myself, which was a mistake. I truly believe you should engage they're not really brokers. That wouldn't do them justice. An investment banker, a corporate financier, whatever word you want to call them, an M&A professional. Just they're doing it every week versus entrepreneurs. Like I was a solo. I was a one gig. I make the difference. Are you a mountain climber or a freedom fighter? Freedom fighter, that's what I was. I just wanted to get out, sell up, get as much as I could, and have my freedom. And mountain climber will sell up and go, I'm going to go again. And again and again. These serial entrepreneurs, which too many people with serial entrepreneur, by the way, and it's bullshit. It's like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Some of them haven't done anything at all, but they're still serial entrepreneurs. But that's another story. But for those who actually do go on, and so they'll have the experience, and there's a thing called acquisition entrepreneurship now, where you acquire, you don't start companies, you just acquire, which I think
I find very interesting. Yeah,
hugely interesting. It's acquisition, entrepreneurship through acquisition, ETA, and there's all the top Ivy League schools in the US are teaching this now because of baby boomers that are.
Well, I was in Austin, Texas, a number of years ago, and I did a course called "How to Buy or Exit a Business" by a guy called Keith Cunningham, who was a
Oh, yeah, yeah,
enormous
yeah,
amount,
yeah.
enormous amount of respect for, and I spent a lot of time studying with him. But he is very much into this acquisition entrepreneurship, or at least he was. He's kind of retired now. But he gave a great analogy. He said, "You want to fly or buy an airplane. What do you do? Do you buy a kit? Do you walk out and all the pieces are on the ground and you try and figure out how to build it, put it all together, and then once you've built it, see if you can figure out to fly the damn thing? That's approach A. That's what most entrepreneurs do." He said, "What's your odds of success?" Now we know what the odds of success are. Your odds of success are 5%. That's statistics. 95% failure rate. He goes, or do you find a plane, built by Boeing or whoever, that they have mastered the art of building planes. They've been doing it for 70 years with a trained pilot who's been flying for the past 20 years. And do you buy that airplane with the pilot in the seat? If you can get that for the right price, what's your odds of being successful? And you put that way, you go, well, so his thing in that course we did was all about teaching you how to find that plane with the pilot in the seat, and that's the business to buy. And I mean, it's not what I did. It's not what I did. But still, not that I will do it again. But if I was to do it again, I think that's what I would look for. Go, no, find find the business. But so the other thing we know is that most businesses are small businesses. Like in most businesses are small business. To join EO, you require a turnover of €1 million or something. So most businesses are small, privately family-owned businesses. And then there's a small number of businesses who successfully scale into large businesses. And I don't know what I don't know what the criteria of revenue profits is. But if most businesses are relatively small businesses and they're in the couple of million or whatever, of owners of these businesses, have they any hope of selling them or moving on from them? Are these, what scale of business do you have to have before you can do, you can get someone to acquire you, etc.?
It's a good point. I mean, I did this first Plan Your Exit 3 years ago, and we had people in the audience who thought exactly that. Said, I'm going to go, but I don't think I have a saleable business.
Yeah.
And 3 of those are speaking at the event on the 1st of May.
Yeah, I know a couple of them.
Who achieved exits that were beyond their belief of what was in their mind. But I would say all of them. Yeah. Well, you'd have to come to the event and you'll hear their story, because it'll be coming from them and what they learned at my events and from loads of other different places was that, shit, if I actually get my act together, I can create a saleable business. Because you're right, 96%, only 4% go above the million mark. And if you think about a million, it's nothing. I mean, the EO membership rate, when I joined EO in 2001, it was $1 million in sterling.
And it's still $1 million.
And it's still $1 million. That's $2 million. That's nearly 1.8 million or something now, but it hasn't changed. $1 million is nothing. But if you think of it, only 4% of businesses go into that million category.
So for 96% of entrepreneurs, that million is really something.
It is.
That's the point. I mean,
absolutely right.
You're saying it's nothing, but for 96% of people listening to this podcast, they'd love to have €1 million business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and by the way, it's very difficult to get there.
It is. And look, we were all we were all startups at one point. I didn't acquire my company. I started bootstrapped it, in my one bed flat. And you did something similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I work with companies who are not at startup stage, but they're at that maybe half to $1 million or so, and they're just trying to get up to that $1 million mark. It is
difficult.
It is.
Yeah.
But
so are you talking then just to that 4% who are in that, million plus market?
I do. I work with people between the $500,000 and $1 million, but they need to be in a pretty special market with a special product and really going places. But most for it to be if you have a million quid turnover, you don't really, unless you're in tech or you've got
Yeah.
something that's got so much runway left on it that's
Yeah.
about to
Yeah.
go ballistic or
There's not much to be buying.
pre-revenue. There's loads of plenty of great valuations on companies like that. But if you're a mom and pop at below a
Yeah.
million, you don't have a you will and we've had people.
You have a job, you don't have a
You
business.
have 100% of a job, correct?
Yeah, it might be a very well paying job, but
Yes, and it'll give you freedom, and it'll pay the kids' education and your holiday home, and maybe a
the
boat. I
business
don't
is
know.
you, and that's the problem.
Hmm?
The business is you. You're the person that is the business. And when there's nothing for you and I to buy, because if the founder goes, there's no business. That's the problem.
Exactly. And we have a thing called the value driver assessments, 8 assessments over the key things that drive the value of your business. And the first thing is, are you the CEO redundant in your own business? You
Yeah.
know, are you working for the business or is the business working for you?
Yeah.
And
And
that's
that's the
kind of the
first.
first thing. And you meet people who go, oh, I want to sell, I want to sell next year. I say, okay, well, and they're involved in every customer, they're involved in every
Yeah.
operation, they're involved in all the staff taking. And then and people who are who are speaking, we've got 6 speakers altogether, 7 speakers altogether now. What's the name? Mark O'Dwyer, the Big Red Cloud sold last week.
Mark is coming onto the podcast in a
Is
couple of weeks.
is he? All right, he did
Yeah.
mention he was asked to go on a podcast. Didn't realize it was you. Great stuff.
Well, he was recommended to me by a mutual friend. I didn't realize he was coming on but a
Mark,
mutual friend said you should, gave me his number, said you got to get Mark on the podcast. And so,
Mark's brilliant.
yeah, he's
Mark's
coming on.
brilliant. Yeah, yeah. Well, he's going to be at the event on the 1st of May,
Yeah.
and we're closing the door. There's no suits at this event. It's just entrepreneurs, and we're trying
Yeah.
to create that like EO YPO feeling where it's lockdown, doors are closed, no records. Tell us what happened.
Mm.
The bumps in the road. One of the questions I'm going to be asked them is, what's the mulligan? What would you have done? If you were to take that shot again, what would you be doing in the deal process? Tell us about the sneaky things that happen through the process, the curveballs, all of those kind of things. So it does take on a kind of a dynamic of its own when it's in a closed door environment. And that's kind of with these events, we're trying to create just a peer-to-peer learning on something that's so crucial. And I guess that you asked the question, why did I get involved in this? There's so many, and myself included, we don't end up for me, it was 20 years, almost on the dot. But on average, I think it's 18 years that people build a business and then sell. 5%, only 5% a year later are happy with the exit that they got. There's a lot of discontent.
Now, do you mean financially, or they haven't
Financially, the
financially?
deal, they're happy with the deal that happened, and because a lot of
Only
those,
5% are happy.
only
Wow.
5% are happy.
Okay.
And there might be a deferred payment or an earnout, which I say stay away from that. If there's a second check, and this is across guys in the States and the UK and Ireland, anybody I've spoken to sold, whether there was a second check due, I haven't found anybody who got that check even partially. And I got one lady who sold, and she had to write half of the first check back.
Wow.
Through warranties and indemnities.
So because she did a bad deal, is that what you're saying?
Pardon?
She did a bad deal, effectively.
She thought she was doing a good deal. We all think we're doing a good deal, and but we're naive to this, and that's what we want to with these events, is trying to say, here, you need to open your eye. You need to really go into this wide open, and we don't have to learn from our own mistakes. And it's the biggest single transaction for most entrepreneurs, because 90% of our wealth is tied up in our business. But we go into these events like we're planning a holiday.
I remember, it reminds me, I remember, I don't know how long it is ago. I'm 35 years married, so it could be 30 something years, maybe 32 years ago, when I sold my first house. So we'd been in the house for 2 or 3 years, and then we decided we're going to move on. And I remember we hired some well-known people to sell the house, and they sent up this young girl. So at the time, I was whatever age I was, late 20s, and my time was selling. That's what I did. I spent my day selling, and I was relatively good at it. And they sent this young girl up to sell my house. I can't remember what it was at the time, maybe 50,000. Where it seemed, I know you can buy a car for that now, but that was an expensive house. But she was selling my house, and I remember standing and watching her doing this and going, "Oh my God, she's incompetent." I mean, and getting rid of her and doing the deal myself because I thought, I mean, I bloody well know how to sell, and she doesn't, and I can sell this house. And I know in the back of my mind, I have this notion, which I know is wrong, and you've pointed out is wrong. I have this notion that when my business is sold, I have to be the guy in the room because I'll do the deal. And because it's like, well, I've been in this business for 40 years and all of these things, and I would be the best. I'm a good sales guy, be the
Mm.
best guy to do the deal. And the reality is, the truth is, Paul, you know nothing about this. You know nothing about it. Shut up and get out of the room.
Mm.
But my instinct is, no, I got to be in the room doing the deal because I'm the deal maker.
And we
No, you
all
do.
do, Paul. We
Of
all
course,
do.
it's
And
our nature if you're an entrepreneur.
yeah,
It's just
and
our nature.
the speak, because I had a pre-session with each of the speakers before the event on the 1st of May, and you're going to hear the opposite to what I did and what you were just talking about there. I need to be in the room. There were people who, and this is a big part of their negotiation and a big part of their entire preparation and high valuation was not being in the room. And how do you get to the point where you're not, of course, you're getting the reports
Of
live,
course, yeah, but you're not doing the deal,
but
yeah.
you're absolutely the wrong person to be in the room.
Yeah.
But how do you get to that point? And there are speakers coming who are, and they're going to,
Yeah.
that's exactly what they're going to talk about. It's like, how do you make sure you're not that person in the room? Because you can leverage, the whole point of FOMO, creating, that fear of missing out for a buyer and not getting, which is one part, but then as a seller, not getting emotionally involved. Well,
Yeah.
what's a better way than not getting emotionally involved, but not even being in the room?
Yeah.
Because buyers do, and it's part of the seven, the one of our colleagues, John Ratcliffe, wrote a piece, The Seven Traps Sophisticated Buyers Set for Unwary Sellers.
Yeah.
And one of those is that they'll befriend you. This is the pinstripe suit.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're doing it every week, and they will be asking you little subtle questions.
Mm.
And one of them is like, "What? I've got a kind of ballpark what you want for your business." A little throwaway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people fall into that trap, and then bang, there you go. Your
Yeah.
negotiation is over because you said,
Yeah.
okay, I think 8 million, 10, 15, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You just give
And
them.
now they know. Yeah.
So
But they also probably know he'll settle for 30% less than that.
precise, and even more because they're going to trip you up on the 11th hour, and
Yeah.
it's part of their playbook.
It's
The
part of
playbook for the
the
private equity or the buyer, the competitive buyer, whichever it might be, is we're at opposite ends. They want to get you for as cheap as possible, and
Of
we want to
course, yeah,
get as much as possible. And I love the saying is that you can name your price as a seller, but it's the terms that really count.
yeah.
And the seller you can call whatever price you want. Yeah, a headline price if that's what you want for your ego, and you can publish that,
Mm.
knock yourself out. But here's
Mm.
what you're actually going to get paid, because we
Yeah,
will set so many traps for you that you're going to be lucky to even keep that first check, dude. And and that's out of probably 40 people I've spoken to who've sold. None of those have had their second check.
And the interesting thing is, though, is I mean, I've been in business for 40 years, maybe, but the average person who sells has been in business for 20 years. And in those 20 years, you have never sold a business. But yet, so you're obviously a gobshite. But which is okay. It's fine being a gobshite as long as you realize you're the gob. What's that thing is when you sit at the poker table, if you don't know who the idiot is, within 5 seconds, it's you. And that's the impression I get. And what's coming across in this conversation, Brian, is your passion for this. You really seem to have, because I know there's two things when it's exiting a business that seems to be important, which I'm taking away. One is the price. You need your freedom check, but then you need to find a purpose in life after that, because the money won't give you the purpose. It just gives you some degree of financial freedom. Have you found that?
Yeah. I find the work that I do now is very purposeful, and I think it's some the hierarchy of needs or whatever, purposeful work, and I can see myself doing this till I'll die in the harness, and it doesn't feel like work because it's very
Yeah.
enjoyable, it's fulfilling, and you know that you're the whole changing outcomes for people that otherwise could have gone a different way. And I think as a country, we do need to show the next generation, and we need to become more public about great exits, not bad exits. And
Yeah.
people don't talk about bad exits. And I think, like, I've got a bunch, I've got kids from 15 to 22, three girls and a boy. They will all be entrepreneurs. There's no doubt, because we've so many people coming and going out of here. They're like,
Yeah.
I could do that. She's brilliant, but I think I could be as good as him.
Yeah.
I could do. And
Yeah.
all of my kids are like, I can't see myself ever working for. I said, go and work for somebody, become a good follower, then become a good leader. La la la. But they'll all, we need entrepreneurship is dropping every year right now in Ireland. We need to show the next Gen Z in particular, that this is a worthy career choice. And hey, look at these people. And that's why I love the three people who are coming back who were here 3 years ago
Yeah.
at a Plan Your Exit event are now coming back and telling their story, is that there is amazing outcomes that can be achieved. And if we can show, what you can see, what you can believe and perceive and believe you can achieve, another corny American saying. But if kids can see that actually this is a career path, and wow, because all of my kids are sat at the back of these events. They were at the last one. They're at every event, and they're kind of looking, wow, I can do that. And I think we need to. That needs to be shown to the next gen of entrepreneurs, because with the stuff the shit that's going on right now with tariffs and look at Intel, which is just, you can see it from here. We're gonna lose 1,000 jobs in Leixlip, according to yesterday's announcement from Intel. Where are they going to go? Well, if we have an entrepreneurial based economy, we don't need to worry about that anymore. And people having to leave this country, that's kind of one of my purpose. One of the kind of driven is that if we can create an entrepreneurial based economy, our kids will only leave this island out of choice, not out of necessity, because they can become an entrepreneur. They can live in an entrepreneurial community that is self-sufficient. We don't need to look to our left and to our right for investment for FDI. What I believe is IDI is where we need to be at, and I think that's changing. Internal direct investment, not foreign direct investment. And if this country can get a move on that policy and that kind of journey, I think we can. I think Ireland in 10 or 20 years could be totally different. We'll be self-sufficient. We're a long way on the way to it anyway. We're highly successful.
But when we spoke a while ago about the fact that you know 96% or whatever of business are these small businesses, sub 1 million or whatever it is. But when we talk about industry in Ireland in the media, they will talk about Intel, they'll talk about Google, they'll talk about all of these Ryanair, all of these enormous companies. The reality of it is most people are employed in small businesses. A lot of those are family business. This is the reality. So I think very much we need to encourage that. We need to support those people, because EO does a great job of doing that, but also those small founders have no support network. And just like you had mentors around you, they've no one to guide them. They've no one to support them, and that's massive. And I think what you're doing is you're also showing people, yeah, but there's you will eventually, like everything, want to transition out of this, and this is how you go about that. The one thing, as we wrap up, the one thing that I like most about what you're doing is, I love this education of teaching founders in the process of how to exit a business properly. I think it's so important. What attracts me most about what you're doing here, Brian, is that uh, you're not only you're not only wearing the t-shirt, you've walked the road. I mean, this is something you have done, and the people in the room next week are people who've done this. And I mean, I'm sure you've attended many events over the years, as I have. I'm not going to name any names, but they have a guy up, and effectively the guy works for an insurance company or a bank or a big legal firm. And that's the people who they stand up to talk to us and are going, you don't know what it's like to sit in your back room when you're the only employee. You don't know how difficult it is when you've now 10 employees and you're trying to figure out how to do payroll, all this sort of stuff. So what I think is unique about what you're doing is that your background is entrepreneurship. You're talking about what you know because you did it, as are all these people. So it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I've learned so much. I mean, this is you found purpose in what you're doing, and I found purpose in this because I get to speak to great people, and selfishly I learned so much in these conversations. I've learned a lot of this. I'm really looking forward to the event, and I wish you every success in your work supporting and helping entrepreneurs scale and exit.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Paul.
It's been a pleasure, Brian.